Good day, everyone, and how are you? Okay, what's going on?
What's going on?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's cut to the chase. What do we got going on here today? We have this beautiful Camaro. Now, we filmed Camaros in the past, but the reason why this one is special is because this one is the first to get the new pack kit. New pack kit? What do you mean? They do something different? We're gonna be doing Epicenter, because Epicenters are cool. We're also going to be putting some Power Series 6.5 components in the door, Power Series 6x9s in the back. These guys right here, and these guys right here. And then what's going to drive this home is going to be this Pioneer W4500 NEX. Now, we've just spent the better part of 35-40 minutes trying to game plan this car and figure out where the heck are we going to put the stuff, because you know, it's not like there's a ton of room in the back of this Camaro, and it's not like the amplifiers are that big. We are going with the micro T amplifiers, so I mean they're small, they're compact, and they will hide. So I think we've come up with a game plan. So let's roll the intro, and I'll catch you on the other side. Now, if you caught the video we did on my Camaro when we put the Alpine DSP in, you know that the Boston acoustic amplifier is located here on the driver's side rear, which is going to be perfect for our two micro T amplifiers. Now, micro T amplifiers are these guys right here. T just means power. We have a 404 and we have a 501. 501, of course, is going to be powering the subwoofer, and the 4 channel is obviously going to be powering our mids and highs. As you can see, they're very compact, but they just pack a ton of power. And we've been kind of fitting how we're going to do this, and we think we can stack them right here like this. We just are going to need a little bit of spacer, about an inch to come off, but there's plenty of room behind this panel for those things to go in. And then the Epicenter is going to go hiding on the other side, so everything will be tucked out of the way and you won't even know it's there. Now, since it is getting a subwoofer, I haven't mentioned which one we're going with, but he's going to go with this guy, the Scar Audio VVX12 V3D2. That should give him enough bass, don't you think, Fernando?
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. First thing I want to do is go ahead and start constructing the amplifier rack and figuring out how I'm going to get all that in there, figure out my wire paths and stuff like that. We also have to either decide whether we're going to do 4 gauge to 8 gauge distribution block, or if it's just going to be easier to run 2 8 gauge wires from those amplifiers. And the reason why I say that is in the trunk here, you see this is the main power wire coming into the car, and right here, this is where the spare tire sits. And as you can see, the spare tire is actually cutting into this. Now, this is a shield that goes over it, so this is made to get some pressure on it. Our wire needs to be tucked next to this in order to function properly. As you can see here in the back, this is really kind of poor routing on their part. Granted, they put, you know, insulation over it, and it's more or less not a problem, but the tire is sitting right on this, so that's kind of dumb. So we don't want to be anywhere near this. When we're routing our wire, 2 8 gauge might be easier to get into this channel and down into here. Now, that means we're going to have to put our distribution blocks down here. We'll figure it out. Sometimes overcoming the factory stupidity is just what we do. Now, Fernando's plan of attack is to go ahead and get started on this driver's door. The one cool thing about the Camaros is it's very, very, very difficult to run wires through the doors, as we're finding out on my car. So we're gonna have to mount the crossovers in the door panel, which I'm not a big fan of, but like if you, there again, saw when we put the speakers in Fernando's car, we have a plan for that as well, which he'll show you. But one of the key factors in that is this guy. It's a 6-channel waterproof connector, and what we do is when we mount the crossovers in, they're attached to the physical door panel itself. That way you can unplug it and plug it. Hopefully we'll be able to use those in these. We'll find out as the story moves along into the future. You got your GoPro all set? I tell you what, I'm gonna cut to him right now taking this door panel off. You guys enjoy that, and I'll see you guys in a little bit when I start working on the amp rack.
First thing we're gonna do is locate where the screws are. It has a cover right here where you grab the door handle. That's a Torx T30. In the handle where you open the door, it's another screw. You grab pigtail. An angle pigtail, that would be cool, so you can like pull it. Just be careful, don't scratch it. And behind that, that's a 7mm. Make sure you have more in here. So we have 7mm on there. This one came out. It has 3 clips, so you just grab your panel tool. Be careful, just unclip it. And that in the corner, it's another 7mm. Now you grab your pry tool, plastic. Right, so the factory speaker is out. For this car, we're gonna use the Metra 823010. So we're gonna go to the bench, put some foam in the back. We don't have to put foam in the front because Rockford actually put foam in the back of the speaker. But also we're gonna do fast rings in this one. This one, because we're gonna put the crossover inside the door panel right here, we're gonna extend this wire, so we're gonna solder it right now, run the wire and run it to the center of the door. So in this one we're gonna put the silicone heat shrink because the connection is gonna be in the inside and we don't want it to corrode.
Since we've worried so much about where this thing is mounted and how it's in there, let's go ahead and talk about it for a minute and some of the features that this particular crossover has. And they're located here on the end. First thing you're going to notice is this input and output. You see 4 inputs and you see 4 outputs. That means this crossover is bi-ampable. And by that I mean you could run a 4-channel amp just to this set of speakers. You could run your mid in here and your tweeter in here. Or for example, channels 1 and 2 can run your tweeter and channel 3 and 4 could run your mid-range. That's obviously going to be for a pair. Then you could use this passive crossover in order to run those without having any fear of what the active crossover would be in the amplifier. Not all amplifiers have a bandpass for the mid-range, and this would allow you to utilize this crossover as the top bandpass frequency for that mid-range. And what I mean by bandpass frequency is that you have a bottom, and that's the lowest sound that tweeter is going to play. Then you have a top, which is going to be the highest frequency your mid-range can play, and then you have a bottom for the mid-range. This will provide you with that top frequency for the mid-range. Now if your amplifier has a bandpass channel, then you might want to think about not using this. Now for us, just because we're using 2 channels of the 4-channel amplifier to power our front speakers, we will just be connecting to the tweeter input here. That is going to be what you're going to want to hook up to. If you go up to the mid-range, you're not going to get any sound out of it. Next, you have your tweeter attenuation located here. It comes as +2 dB, 0, or -2. This is how loud that tweeter is going to be. I would strongly suggest 0 or -2. And on this side, we have axis. On axis, off axis. Now what that is referring to is the position of those tweeters. So if the tweeters are up in the dash like this, that would be considered on axis. If they're over here in the door panels, that would be considered off axis. So for us, because we're putting them in the door panels, we are going to be off axis and we're going to run it at -2 because these are super loud tweeters and they don't need to be killing it. Alright, so he's made some great progress on his idea. Let's zoom in and take a look. So as you can see, this is the bracket that he made. He retained that factory screw and then added 2 short other screws here. You can see here where it tongues into this piece of foam. So we can pick up the whole door panel the way this is mounted. This is in there nice and secure. Good job, buddy.
I went and put some labels because we're gonna solder new wires. We're gonna cover everything with Tesa tape, and every time we're gonna unplug it, you know, dealer is gonna go for service. At least we know which one is which one.
So Fernando just said those magic words, which are, hey man, this door panel's done. So all the wires are zip tied into the bracket as well, so they won't get pulled out of the crossover. The crossover, as we said, is firmly mounted. Here is our 6-pin connector. That way this will be able to come off with the door easy, just like all these other connectors that are in there. Now all we need to do is get this wired up in the car and we'll be all set. So to get the tweeter out of the mount, there's one Phillips screw on the back. Then the panel just snaps off. And then there's some little snaps here that hold the factory tweeter in place. And then it pops right out. Now this is a pretty beefy size factory tweeter, which is nice because the T2 tweeter is also a very beefy tweeter. And believe it or not, it fits right in place. It actually snaps in, so there's really no mount. Now there is a big open air chamber behind this, so we're gonna go ahead and put some foam in here just to kill any sound that might get around it. Now this is just regular sheet foam that we have. Don't ask me where we got it, I have no idea. Now you can use any type of foam you want. Basically all this is doing is this is just going to kill any back waves that are coming off the tweeter or anything that's recirculating around the back side of it. It's going to focus all that energy towards the front, and then it's just going to fill up all this space inside of here. And then of course we're going to tape up all our wiring so that it looks more factory. And for that we're using the exterior Tessa tape, and then we can go ahead and snap it back together. The last thing we're going to go ahead and do is add our bullet connectors to it so that the tweeter will be serviceable. And then the last thing we'll do is go ahead and put a little piece of shrink wrap on here. Make sure if you are using the bullet connectors, you put the shrink wrap all the way at the back of the connector so that the female version can slide over it. Now your tweeter's all set. Repeat it on the other side. So now he's got our plug installed in the car, so let's take a look at the finished product. Here is our harness that's going to plug into our door panel. It's zip tied up into the master harness. We have our tweeter wire over here that will plug in right here when we go to plug that in. Our mid-range is all in with the factory bracket. The foam is all on. So the idea now is just like these here that plug in, we will just plug in ours. And then if they ever need to service this, it'll just unplug as well. Because remember, at the end of the day, these are cars. They fall apart, they break, they get old. We hope that what we did is going to last a very, very long time. Hopefully longer than some of the parts of the car. Like, let's say the window regulator. It is a Chevy. I own one, but hey, things happen. It needs to be able to come apart and not when someone goes to pull that door off, the crossover just falls on the floor, or it's tucked inside on the other side of the vapor barrier here, and then it's just going to get all wet and rust and corrode and get all nasty. Ooh. Things to think about when you're deciding where you want to put that crossover. Ideally, the first spot would be in the car somewhere, but if you do have to go in the door like we did here, then figure out somewhere to put it where it's going to stay nice and dry and also fully serviceable. You ready to put the door back on?
I'm ready to put it down.
And then you're going to start on the passenger side.
Ooh.
It's a nice thing about doing door panels, especially one that's this involved. And we didn't even do roadkill. I know, right? That's actually going to be phase 2. See, the nice thing is like with this fast ring, it's around the bracket, so this will all come off, and he'll do roadkill at a later date.
Yeah. All right, guys, this door is done. Let's move into another thing.
So a slight change of plans. I went ahead and grabbed the marine version of the amplifiers. Basically the only difference is they're silver and they're conformal coated. I just felt this might be a better idea. This is the 501 and they come with birth certificates, and this one will give us a 522 watts. And then the 4-channel is going to give us 625 watts. Now, one of the cool things about these amplifiers is that there's all this talk about like DD1s and fun stuff like that, distortion detectors. These actually have them built into it. That's what this disc is here. And then these instructions here at the end actually will walk you through how to use them. It makes setting these up super easy as far as figuring out where the radio is going to clip them at. So once we get to the end of the video, we'll show you how that all works. Now, these amplifiers have a plug system. On the highs amplifier, these are your speaker outputs here, and then they have the RCAs here. These amplifiers will take high level or low level, and by doing that, you simply will cut off the RCA section and you can run voltage into the amplifier. Or if you're going to be doing line level, you can just leave these on and attach to to them. You can also cut these off and lengthen these to any length you want, which is what we're going to be doing. Because of where I'm going to put these, I want these to be about 3 or 4 feet longer. I'm not a big fan of having all these bundles just kind of all in the same spot. It doesn't look all that pretty. So I like to stagger my RCA inputs. Now as far as the sub amplifier goes, it has a speaker plug here on the end of the amplifier, along with the power, ground, and remote plug. These take an 8-gauge input. Because it doesn't have the Boston acoustic stereo in it, I happen to have my amplifier sitting right here. And the reason why I want that is because I want to get the measurements for length and also these feet, because I'm going to make a panel that mimics this and is going to slide into place and lock in, and then we're going to build off of that for this mount. And for that we're going to use some 1/8 inch ABS for the base. We're going to put a 1-inch spacer in there along with a 1/2 inch panel or a 1/4 inch, I'm not sure yet, for these to mount on. They're going to sit just like you're seeing here with all the adjustments towards the inside of the car where we can fold back that panel and easily get to them. This is also where the signal input is on this side, which is good because I want to be able to run my power out on the driver's side and I want to keep my signal out over on the passenger side, mainly because the big giant power wire for the car runs up into that side and loops up the center console. I don't want my signal anywhere near that big fat power lead. Let's get started. Alright, let's head over to the router and router out this shape. Alright, so we have our basic shape all set and ready to go. Now we can build off of this our mount. Now what we need to do is we need to make risers that come off of this about 1 inch. The other thing too is that I just test fit it. Whoever put that goo in the car, if that's your job, slow it down, man. I mean, it's like some kid just went in there with a tube of toothpaste and just squeezed it everywhere. It's like, come on, seriously? I'm sure there's a regulation somewhere that says only put this much, and putting any more is kind of pointless. I'm gonna grab some thick stuff. Now, because I don't like a lot of holes in my plastic as far as test fitting and stuff goes, what we like to do is use some double-sided tape, so when we're mocking something up, we can just stick it together, and then if we need to, we can pull it off without drilling a bunch of holes. And then when we're done, we can go ahead and screw the whole thing together. So looking at the way our amplifiers are going to be mounted, there's not going to be any big wires that are going to be having to come from one side to the other. Power is going to be on this side, signal on that side. The bass knob will have to loop under, and so will the remote turn on. But we're going to have this big channel here, so those small wires, we're not going to have any issues with it. So really all we need is something that is exactly this tall. Then we want to go a little wider so that we have something to screw our wires down to. So we're going to start with 8 1/4 by 12, and then we'll make adjustments from there. Now the other nice thing about using double-sided tape like this is we can put the double-sided tape on, and like this, we're going to go mount this in the car. We could stick this panel on and have it be right where it needs to go in the car, and then we can pull it out. This stuff sticks really well. So let's go ahead into the car and see if this panel fits. Look at that, it's great. So there's an indentation right here that I wanted to make sure that this front edge came up to, so I could get the most amount of room this way. Now we'll go ahead and take this back out, drill all our pilot holes, counter flush, round this thing over, and get it finished up and start mounting the amplifiers to it. So for this, we went ahead and pre-drilled our holes, and we used a countersink bit here to notch it. We're going to use some tapered screws on this, and then I'm going to put some foam on the back of this because I don't want this rattling back there at all. So as you can see, everything is nice and flush. Now if you don't have any foam laying around, another nice thing to use is the soft side of Velcro. Now when you're putting screws on both sides of a mount like we are, make sure you don't drill holes in the same spot on both sides. Believe it or not, it's real easy to do. In my mind, I'm always strategically looking at the same spots, so I have to teach myself to move over just a little bit more than what I think would be perfectly center, because I've done it where I've actually perfectly lined up 2 screws on top of each other. All right, we have our mount made. I'm gonna do one last test fitting just to make sure that this stuff didn't get in the way of anything, and then we'll start wiring up our amplifiers. So everything fit good so far. Now it's time to get the amplifiers mounted to the bracket. We're gonna put the sub amplifier on top so that the heat that this is gonna create, because my guess is this one's gonna be working the most, because I mean, you know, everyone wants a ton of bass. We don't want the heat from this, you know, if we mount it like this, then all that heat is going to transfer through the highs amp. So we'll go ahead and put it on top. That way it will rise up and do its own thing. We also know that this needs to be flush here with the bottom. We do have that gap here on the top that we can use, because this hangs over just a slight bit, which is fine. We want to keep in mind that the power plugs are going to stick out here, so we want to off center it so that this is more that way, because these are just plugs that plug in. They're not big RCAs or anything like that, and they're going to be channeled out and down. So we'll go ahead and line these up and screw them in place. Now, just like before, we'll go ahead and test fit them, make sure the panel closes over them. Yay! Alright, so it fits good. This panel goes on with no problems. The idea is to make our wiring come down. There's an area here. We're going to run across the back here. I'm going to test fit the spare tire just to make sure that that will work and it clears it. Otherwise, I'll come across this area through here. And then the power wire is going to come up and back around. So I have a little bit more testing to do, but otherwise, I'll meet you on the bench and we'll get this bad boy wired up. Alright, so after doing some test fitting with the tire in and all the panels and whatnot to figure out how the heck I'm going to run my wires across the back here, when the tire goes in, there is room here on the bottom. However, it's not guaranteed, meaning if the tire shifts, it will smack into the back. So for the most part, it rests up against that. I don't want to put my wires between the tire and whatnot and then have it shift and smash. So that's out. The way this panel rides, naturally you'd like to go for corners. There's really no corner. So what we end up with is this right here. What I did is I went ahead and taped a piece of 4 gauge into place to be like a mock piece of wire to get an idea of what we're dealing with. There's a spot here and there's a spot here that the wire can come out. And this is essentially what we're running. I mean, it's not gonna be real thick anyways, because it's just a piece of speed wire and then some flat RCA wiring that we're gonna do, but this is where it's gonna have to go. I've test fit it, it works good. We're just gonna obviously put some more connection points on here to make sure that this doesn't roll down or anything. And of course, it's not getting pinched, which is great because there's really nothing on the back of that panel. It's just an open air chamber. So now we have a plan as far as wire management goes. And of course we have plenty of room for the power wire on that side. It's just a matter of getting the right length of wire. Now we can finally get to the bench and start wiring this thing up. So what I like to do when I'm getting ready to start on the amp rack is kind of get everything that I'm gonna need around me. So I have my power and ground wire. I've gone ahead and seen where these are all gonna plug in and figured out that, oh yeah, we have the speaker wires that are also gonna need to go back that way. So they're gonna run up along this area here. I have all my RCA connectors and I'm gonna add on to these after I remove them because I'm not gonna be reusing their connectors. I have my power plugs all set and ready to go. Now I've kind of stared at it for a minute or two, just going over it in my head to figure out, okay, where does everything need to go? Do I need to drill any holes through the board? And I've decided that I'm gonna drill a hole here to route these wires through so they can come up the back and across here, because all the wires are gonna need to come out right here. And then the power wire is gonna come out here across the bottom. Other thing we wanna do too is go ahead and flick these dip switches while we're thinking about it. So first things first, input level, we want to go ahead and turn that all the way down. We want to turn our bass EQ all the way down. We want to make sure it's on 4 channel and not 2 channel. We're going to go ahead and set this to high pass, and we're going to go ahead and turn it to our default 80 Hertz. Come up here to the top amplifier, gain all the way down, bass EQ all the way down. Go ahead and set it to 80 Hertz. Now it's set to 250, so make sure you do a full rotation on this. And then it is low level, so that switch is set up properly. On the side of this amplifier, it has one other switch here, which is if we're going to be using the remote bass knob on and off. Since we're doing an Epicenter, we're not going to be using the bass knob here. We also have subwoofer volume control built into the head unit. So now we can go ahead amp rack is done and all set and wired up. So what we did is we made up our own RCAs and we taped them as thin as possible, meaning so when this goes across the back of the car, it's going to be nice and flat. So there's 6 RCAs up underneath this. We have our speed wire, and on this side we have our 2 8-gauge, both power and ground, as well as our subwoofer wire. And then we finished off the end of it here with some nice ferrules so that they'll go into the speaker cup and be good. Everything is locked into place. Speaker wires are ran across the back here, all zip tied nice and tight. So now we can go ahead and slide this into the car. So all we need to do now is get a bolt for this, and we can tighten that up with a washer. Alright, she's all mounted in place, nice and secure. Now what we need to do is get these wires going across here, and then we have to make a mount for the Epicenter on the other side. We also need, of course, to run the wires, but one step at a time. So for the Epicenter in the opposite corner, what we've done is basically the same as before, but we don't have to come out quite so far. We have a 1/2-inch back piece. There's 3 bolts that are sticking out in the car, so essentially what we've done is we've cut a square, we've pushed it into those bolts, which then makes an indentation in our plastic, and we've drilled those holes. Now this will slide right on. We needed another 1/2-inch piece to clear those bolts, and then we've gone ahead and put a 1/4-inch ABS on top of that. Now we'll be able to get a screw in this bolt right here. These are really tight, like we have to pry this off, so this will hold in there nice and secure. Now what we need to do is go ahead and mount our Epicenter onto it, just like this. And then for the most part, this is done. We just have a power, ground, and accessory that are gonna run up with the bass knob, and our RCAs are gonna plug in here. So let's screw this thing down real quick, and then we'll hop in the car and we'll plug everything in. Just like that. Let's go ahead and put a bolt right here. Alright, she's in place. All we have to do is plug in our RCAs and our power cable. And of course, the one thing we don't want to forget, which makes the Epicenter all that fun, is the control knob. Now all we need to do is plug in our other RCAs. We haven't zip tied these up yet. We're just gonna plug these in for right now, just so we can get the length right. And then when we're done, we're gonna go back and add some heat shrink over these ends so that they're nice and insulated. That way nothing can accidentally get in there and touch them. What we need to do now is crawl in the trunk and go ahead and zip tie all these wires on both sides up into place running forward. We also have a backup camera that's gonna go in here. I think now would be a good time to work on that. That way we can run the backup camera wire with all our wiring. That way we're not over cutting zip ties and adding more zip ties. Make sense, Fernando?
Wow, smart.
I know, every now and then. For that, we're gonna be using the Factory Pioneer backup camera. It's just gonna mount up underneath there. To do that, there is this little black piece right here. We're gonna remove that and mount the camera to that. So the camera will sit basically right there in the middle, right about here. He really likes his Florida State tag, so he wants to keep it. So to get this little guy off here, all we need to do is take our pry tool, grab it here from the front, snap it down. There's 3 clips that hold it on either side and one here. We're gonna go ahead and drill a hole in this for our cable to run up through. Then we'll have to drill a hole through this so we can run our cable into the car. So on the bottom of the camera is this body side molding tape here. What we wanna do is make sure we clean this guy off thoroughly. For that, we're gonna use an alcohol pad. We're gonna go ahead and clean both sides. That way when we're touching it, we don't accidentally pick something up on one side and transfer it to the other. I'll also go ahead and clean off my fingertips, because they're probably gonna have a little bit of grease on them too, and I don't want to get any of that. We'll go ahead and wait for that to dry. I always like to do a test fit to just kind of get an idea of where it's gonna go. We want to make sure we move it far enough forward so that there's a place for us to run this wire through, and also so that it can actually see outside of the back of the car. Now, next thing I'm gonna do is gonna go ahead and score a straight line where I want this to go. And then I will put a blue piece of tape on it so that I can see the line even better. Now that I know that, I can find the center. Now all I have to do is peel the tape off and stick it in place. You want to make sure you get the camera as straight as possible. Any deviation, just a slight bit, taken out 10 or 15 feet is going to be huge. So make sure you double check it, triple check it, and then once you have it where you want it, go ahead and push it in place. Make sure that tape is pushed all the way down. Now what I want to do is go ahead and put a screw in the back here to hold this all in place. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the camera itself. What I've done is I've taken my rotozip and I've put a little C-groove in here. That way the camera wire has somewhere to go. I was going to drill a hole through it, but then I thought that if we ever have to service it, that's just going to make it more difficult. So now we'll go ahead and screw it back in place. Just in case you were wondering, there's a little circle here. This is up, so when we put it back in, we want to make sure that is on top. Now we'll just go ahead and get this kind of like not overly tight, just kind of like so it still moves a little bit, because we have to still line it up, and once the screen gets into the dash we can play with it a little bit more. Now one of the things about these cameras is these are like super long for whatever reason. Don't run this into the car and hide this somewhere in a panel. Keep this in the back by the camera. I don't know why they do this, because if this ever were to go bad, I don't want to pull half the car apart just to get to this connection. That's kind of silly, when really all I need to do is replace the camera. Now we can go ahead and fish this through. Now we're going to go ahead and put some insulation on this wire for where it's going to be out here and exposed, so that nothing is going to interfere with it, kind of like they did here from the factory. And then we'll go ahead and drill a hole. I believe I want to drill a hole somewhere right in here. This area down here is a single piece of metal. If I go up into this area, it's a double piece of metal. I want to try to stay away from that. So I went ahead and drilled the hole, put a grommet in place. So now I'm going to go ahead and fish the wire through that hole, and we can go ahead and put some strip caulk in there so that it doesn't rust or corrode or anything like that, and no water will get into the car. We've also insulated the ends that are going to be exposed to anything, and how we did that is we wrapped it with exterior tested tape first, and then we went ahead and put our sleeving over it, keep it nice and protected. Probably better than the factory. Now it's just going to snap back up there in place. Then we'll use our strip caulk to go ahead and cover the hole. So you can see, along with the grommet, the strip caulk does a great job of insulating it. It filled in any remaining gaps that would be there, along with covered the whole exterior. The inside still looks the same with the grommet. You can also put more strip caulk here if you want to be super cautious. Now what we want to do is go ahead and attach this wire with this run that we've done here, and then we'll make our connection right up in here in this area here, so that all we have to do is remove this one panel to get to the camera if anything should happen to it. So we have the epicenter and the amplifiers all in. Wires are ran all towards the front. Everything is zip tied up and ready. Let's move to the front of the car now, and we're going to join Fernando at the head unit. Before we do that, let me show you what I mean by zip tied up and ready. So our wire is zip tied up along here, comes down following the main power wire, in, around, and then down in here. We went ahead and used some of our silicone filled shrink wrap over the wire here, just like they did, so we're matching there. On this side, there again, the wire is all zip tied up and across, goes through where the factory bundle is here, and so everything is out of the way and good to go. Now we already went ahead and pulled the radio out of the dash. Normally we would show you that. That part of this installation hasn't changed. We have a great video up that shows you how to just install the radio if you want to know more in depth. But let's hop in and we'll talk about what we do now. It's a little bit different than when we shot that video. Now one of the things on the kit instructions is in the dash. It shows you parts you need to remove, and they just show you removing this little tiny spot, which is silly because there's a ton of room in this dash if you can get to it, and you need to get to it. So let me show you what we do. So as you can see, like way back there, watch this. I'm gonna put my hand and I can get this way, look, I got half my arm up in that dash. There's tons of room. I mean, look, I'm putting my whole hand in there. You need that room because you have this giant pack module that needs to go somewhere. Now they show you just removing this little area right here. Don't do that. Remove this whole area across here and then all the way back. Leave these two screws. They need to screw in, and make sure you have a nice bridge that still attaches them. But as far as everything else, this needs to go. Now this wire here is gonna chill out, and if you leave what they're telling you, you gotta feed this thing in there, and it's like, it just goes in very poorly. So let's take a look at the updated Camaro kit from pack. What makes this kit different from the previous is the knobs now come installed on it. So this is cool for many reasons. The first one is if you have a car that has another manufacturer's kit in it and you don't have your factory radio anymore, you weren't able to install this kit because you didn't have the knobs. Well, now it comes with those, you can. They actually make this kit with and without the knobs, and also you can buy just the knobs by themselves. Other than that, the kit remains the same as far as all the other accessories that it has. There are two little buttons you have to put here for the seat heaters. We'll get to in a little bit. Now for those of you that have never seen what comes in the kit, we'll go ahead and unbox it and pull all this stuff out. So in the box we get the instructions, we get the main wiring harness, air conditioning wire harness, we get a USB extension, the brain box, the antenna adapter, the chime module, this is the thing that's going to ding, powering harness that's going to connect to your aftermarket radio, and if it had a backup camera, the factory backup camera retention cable, a left and right side bracket, the auxiliary adapter, a pocket, some spacers, a bag of screws, and then the control knob covers for either the heated seats or the non-heated seats. Now the first thing we want to do is go ahead and get these brackets attached to our radio so that we can test fit the housing. Now the factory radio, you are going to need to remove these three clips along the top and install them onto the new kit. Other than that, you're done with this. Now the first thing we want to do is go ahead and break off these little ears here. These are for if you're using the pocket. If not, go ahead and remove them and then sand them flat. Now what I like to do is actually use the pocket onto the mounting brackets to kind of see how far this forward lip needs to be away from here, so I can get a good idea how far this lip needs to be away. So looking at this, I have a little more than 1/8 of an inch. So that means that gap between here and here needs to be a little more than 1/8 of an inch. Now we're going to take it over to the car and test fit it. Don't put those clips on until the last thing, because we just want to be able to test fit it, make sure this goes on, and make sure that the radio is centered up and whatnot, and then we have a good top and bottom. We don't need those clips on there yet. Alright, so seeing how far the kit is supposed to go in and where we're at, I think I need to go back like a 1/16 of an inch more on the radio. Alright, so we have a good depth right there. This is flush like it was when it wasn't out. We're going to leave that like that for right now. The only test we're going to do is at the very end, before we snap this in and put those white clips on, is we'll do a open and close test to make sure that there's plenty of room for that to open and close. I think there will be. There's enough of a gap here for that to happen. I'm actually going to leave this in here for right now just because I have no place else to put it, and this will keep it from getting scratched. Let's head back over to the bench. We'll work on the wiring harness. Now just like any puzzle, when you have too many pieces to look at, it can get to be a bit foreboding. So what we want to do is move some of this off of here so we can concentrate on individual sections. The first thing we want to do is go ahead and grab the USB and the aux cable here, and we could set those aside. These are going to get plugged into the back of the center console and ran forward up behind the radio. With that, we could also remove the Pioneer secondary USB cable because we don't need those on here for any of this. We can also take off the GPS antenna. That'll get installed in the car, and the Bluetooth microphone. We're not going to need that for right now either. So that leaves us with these pieces right here. I like to start with the main harness that's going to plug into my car and work out from there. I also don't like any of the tape that they put on these things, so I go ahead and remove them as well. Now another feature that this kit has added from the previous is this length of power and ground here, and what that's designed to do is loop around and through the main brain on the unit. So in previous versions you had the power and ground here that would run directly through the unit and feed this. What they're doing now is it's still going in here to feed this, but you're looping it around to feed here as well. The reason why they're doing that is because they wanted to increase the bus size for power and ground, and instead of having to build a whole new brain box to increase that bus, they're just looping the unit around. It's a simple solution. So I'm going to go ahead first and do is get these all dressed up so that they'll look factory, and with that we're going to use our exterior Tessa tape. The reason why we use exterior instead of the more fleecy style interior is that this will handle more heat and it won't get gooey as fast. Now I like to start between 1.5 inches and 2 inches from my main plug and work my way in. And as you're wrapping it, pull and wrap, pull and wrap. You want it on there as tight as possible. Now the other thing we want to do to this is remove this guy here. This is a secondary aux input for the radio. We're not going to be using that. We're just going to pull it out because we're using the other aux cable. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and plug in our harness to our main brain box. It's labeled all across the top as far as where these plugs have to go. Starting here next to the pack logo, it says Amplified Factory Audio. So if this had the premium sound system, we could plug in here. This one doesn't. It has the standard standard factory audio. That means that there's no amplifier inside of it. If we were just putting in a basic radio, we would go ahead and plug into that. And then the 18 watts by 4 or 50 watts by 4 from the deck would then go out to all the speakers. And then we'll come over here where it says vehicle connection, and you'll notice there's a piece of tape. We're gonna go ahead and remove that tape, and why we're removing that is because we're gonna also come over here and there's a dial on the back. The reason why that tape is there is because it's telling you to set the steering wheel controls. We're gonna turn it to 7, and what that has to do with is inside the instruction manual, if you turn to the steering wheel section on page 4, right across here, it tells you the number you're gonna want for the radio you're using. In this case, we're using Pioneer, which is 7. Now we can go ahead and plug in our harness. Now let's go back to the speaker harness for a minute. As I said, if we were using deck power, we'd plug it in like this. We're not though. We're going to be using an amplifier. And we don't want to run the power from our amplifier through this. It's really not designed to handle the power from the amplifier. So what we want to do is go ahead and unplug that. Now we're going to go ahead and cut this connector off, because we're going to need to connect our amplifier wires up to here to go off to the speakers in the car. We won't be using either one of these. We'll go ahead and throw this in the box so that if he ever decides to pull the amplifiers out and just use the radio to power it, it'll be in the box, along with all his factory radio parts. Now we'll go ahead and set this aside for a moment. Let's grab the secondary harness here. Inside of that, you'll find this guy right here, which is the steering wheel control harness. It has 2 wires connected to it, a black wire that looks like a headphone jack right here, and a blue-yellow wire. The blue-yellow wire is for the Kenwood or JVC. The black wire is for everyone else that uses an 1/8" style steering wheel control interface. Since we're not using either one of those, we'll go ahead and cut it short and cap it off so that it won't get interfered with. It has a cap on it. Go ahead and remove the cap, and now we can come back over and plug this into the brain. This is going to get plugged in next to that rotary knob. Let's take a look at the AC harness right here. Now on this you have this pink and orange with a black stripe wire. These are if you're using the MyTouch system. If your car doesn't have that MyTouch touchscreen in the dash, you can go ahead and cut them short, or if you want, you can remove the tape that they've put on it and remove them from the actual connection point that they've put in here. Now this harness is designed to plug into the back of the kit. We left the kit in the car, so I'm going to hop into the car real quick, plug this in so we don't lose it. Now we'll take a look at the main wiring harness. It's going to go to the aftermarket radio. Go ahead and pull off all the tape. There's a couple warnings that are attached to it, like this one says connect the remote wire from aftermarket radio for audio output. So like there's a remote turn on here, so if this had the Boston Acoustic stereo, you'd need to hook that up in order to turn it on. Even though we've cut them all off, make sure you read them before you cut them off. Now the chime module is going to plug in here to this. On the side of the chime module is a volume control, so if it is too loud, you can turn it down here. Now we'll go ahead and pull out some of the wires that are not going to be used right off the bat. The speaker wires, we're not going to be using those because, like I said, we're going to be wiring directly at the harness on this side. So those are not necessary. So for that, we're just going to go ahead and tape those off. We don't need to cap them off because they're actually not getting connected to anything, so there will be no power going through them whatsoever on either side. Now if you want, you can remove them all together. However, I'm going to leave them because he might need them. Now that's going to leave us a couple more colors here. This guy here is a relay. The reason why there's a relay on here is that this is only designed to put out like 1 amp of current. Well, we need more than that if we ever want to do a backup camera or a processor or anything like that. So this ups that output for us, so we don't have to worry about adding a relay. Next we have a blue-white, which is the amplifier turn on. Make sure you hook this up even if it's not needed. You have a brown loop. This is going to be mute for OnStar, which is going to connect to the Pioneer's yellow-black wire here. There's a blue wire for an amplified antenna. Now this guy here also has an amplified antenna turn on, which is located here, so just make sure you connect those all together. We have an orange-white, which is illumination. That's so that when you turn on the dash lights, the radio will dim. So you have a light green emergency brake wire output. You have a purple-white reverse trigger, so this will send 12 volts every time you put your car in reverse, and that'll allow the screen to switch over if you have a backup camera in. Next is the pink wire. This is the VSS, or Vehicle Speed Sense. This is going to be for use with the wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's also a GPS antenna. This radio doesn't have built-in GPS. The idea behind this combination is that if you're going to have your phone in your pocket, it can use the GPS antenna built into the radio and also the speed pulse coming off of the car to better help guide you down the road more precisely. Now the Pioneer that we're putting in has all the same colors except for that brown and that yellow black that we mentioned. So at this point all we have to do is marry up all our colors together The one other thing we have is that this does have the speaker wires on it. This side we are going to cap off these speaker wires because these are going to be live. We want to make sure that they don't touch anything in the dash. Now we also have to add on a power, ground, and remote for the Epicenter that we ran in the trunk of the car. So we'll go ahead and wire those in. We'll have little pigtails that you can plug into. Then we also have to tie in an accessory and ground pigtail for the backup camera that we're installing. We're getting closer to the finish line. Not really, actually we're quite far from the finish line. We still have the rear speakers to do in the back. We still have all the peripherals for the radio to go in. And of course running all the wires forward and connecting. Really it's a lot of work behind the radio and the rear speakers. So I mean I guess we're getting closer to the done mark?
No.
No?
No.
No, oh we still gotta put the subwoofer in the box.
Nope.
And then once all that is done, then we actually have to tune it. So, and the tune is you know, gains and whatnot, so that's gonna take some time. But we're pounding the clock here. I don't know if the puzzle makes any more sense, but here's where we're at. Let's start with what's gonna plug into the factory side here. We've ran our remote turn-on wire over to here because it is the speed wire. So now it comes from the main harness and loops all the way over to here. We added in our power and ground jumpers. Our relay is hanging off to the side. We have our first set of outputs. This is gonna be for the Epicenter. We added in a fuse for that because this is a power going all the way to the back. So there's a fuse holder right here. We have our accessory power and ground for our backup camera. We have the brown OnStar trigger coming over to this. Now I wanted to point something out. That brown loop, how that works is that if you hit OnStar and you don't have an input on the unit, it's going to shut the unit down and then OnStar is going to talk. If you don't want that to happen, all you have to do is cut that brown loop wire, don't hook it up to anything, and instead of the radio losing power, the OnStar will just talk over the system. So that's up to you. We have our steering wheel control here, our antenna here, our chime module over here so we can move it wherever we want. These are our RCAs for the Pioneer radio. We split these off so we have our signal here, our backup camera and aux plug here, and then the stuff we're not going to be using on this side here. So everything is organized, zip tied, and where it needs to be. As you can see now, this is why we want all that room in the dash. They want you to that little hole. How is all this going to fit in that little hole? So we still have all this stuff that needs to go into the car. So we're gonna hop in and get this stuff all put in. So one of the other things we have to do to this kit is add in whether it has seat heaters or no seat heaters. And how you test for that is what's going on here. So this does not have seat heaters. So we want to grab the units that say blank. And they are marked left and right, so make sure you grab the right ones. This one says L and this one says R. Now because we have the non-seat heaters, there is an amendment on the last page here. And what it's telling you to do is lay them flush like this. And on the side, there's these little teeth that stick up. We need to remove all 3 of these teeth so that there's 4. We only need to remove 3 that stick up so that this will go in. For that, I'll just use my flush cutters. Now the reason why you don't have to do it on the seat heater ones is they don't have these. All right, now we got those removed. We'll go ahead and remove the little stop stickers off of this. And they are directional, meaning they have to go in a specific way. There's a little tooth here at the top that needs to line up with the input here. Now you do have to push fairly hard so that they go all the way in, and then you're all set. They should sit nice and flush just like the factories. And since we have both kits here, we'll go ahead and remove these top clips. For that, we're just going to use a small flathead screwdriver, kind of work on one side. As you're lifting up, push down the terminal on the other side, and it'll pop out just like that. So lift up, push down in the center.
Alright, so what I did for my fuse holder, I grabbed an 1/8 inch ABS. We have 2 factory bolts under the spare tire next to the battery. So what I did is heat up the plastic, take it to the car, and just push it in the form. Now we have this weird shape. I still have to put a razor in the bottom, and my fuse holder is gonna sit right there. And don't forget, in this type of fuse holder, pop the bottom side and tight the screws. So we have our 2 factory screws and then our factory clips are gonna hold it in place.
Fernando just finished wiring up the fuse holder. Let's take a look at what we got. He went ahead and added some of the fuzzy side of the Velcro on the back of this so that it won't rattle. It's being held in place with this here and this here. The 5,000 zip ties we added should hold it in place rather well. Power wire is connected to the battery here. All we gotta do is put the cover back on. This of course will clear the tire, which is what we were worried about. So in case you guys were wondering, to change the speakers in the rear deck of this car, you have to pull pretty much from the running boards, meaning the side parts, back out of the car. So you're starting at the driver's and passenger doors floor sill. Those come out, and then you take out either side panel, then you take out either top panel, and then the rear deck will come out. And of course you have to take out the back seat. So the whole back of the car has to come out to get to these speakers. So when you're sitting there going, man, do I want to replace those? It's a commitment, that's for sure. So one of the last things on the list to do is wire up the subwoofer in the box. Let's go ahead and get this thing out of here. So we have a dual voice coil, 2 ohm driver, meaning this is 2 ohms here, this is 2 ohms here. We have 2 positives, we have 2 negatives. We need a 1 ohm load on our amplifier. So what we're gonna do is out of the speaker cup, we're gonna solder a pair of wires where the positives will go here and the negatives will go here. That's gonna give us our 1 ohm load on the amplifier. Let me go grab the speaker cup and I'll demonstrate. So the first thing you wanna do, if you're lucky enough like us to be using one of these boxes, is go ahead and put a pick tool in it and then tighten the screw on the back. You don't want these to be loose for any reason. Now that that's done, we're gonna grab 2 equal lengths of wire. We'll go ahead and strip the ends of the wire here. Go ahead and put some shrink wrap over it, line them up in place, and then we're gonna solder them on. All right, so now we've soldered the whole connection all the way up to here. Go ahead and slide our heat shrink over. And since these wires are all going to the same place on the side, I'm gonna go ahead and add in some tape. Mainly just, they're just not flopping around inside of there. Okay, this harness is all set and ready to go into the box. Basically it's gonna get wired just like this, where it goes positive, negative, and we're all good. We're finally to the position where we have everything done. The last big thing on the list was getting the subwoofer taken care of. We have the Epicenter controller mounted over here where it's easy to get to. Now we just have to get everything into the dash. We've already tucked a ton of stuff, like you can't even see the brain anywhere because it's back up in there. Now we just need to plug the radio in, slide it into place, and do some testing. Which mic is this? Is one. So now we want to go and check our 4 corners. That sound, and it's the right sound in all 4 corners. That seems to be working good. Now, as far as the back ones are concerned, it's really hard to get up there and with the window and all that. We could test them from the underside. And what we're gonna be looking for is red, red, green instead of green, green, red, because the fronts are green, so we know we have to match that. So if we measure from the underside of the speaker, we should get the opposite because it's moving in the opposite direction from where we're measuring it. So we got red, red, green on both sides. All good there. We're moving along. Now that we have that done, we're gonna go ahead and unplug the speakers from the amplifier so that we can set up the gains, and then we'll do an auto EQ. Sound about right?
Yep.
Then we'll actually listen to it and do our tune. Cool. All right. We want to unplug the speaker wires. You never want to do one of these tests with the speaker wires plugged in. None whatsoever. And we've also bypassed the Epicenter. So out of the radio, directly into the amplifiers, nothing connected to the output. So disconnect the subwoofer, disconnect all the speakers. You're just testing the amplifier's signal. That's it. All right, so first up on the list is the 4-channel. And we have the gains turned all the way down. The bass EQ still turned all the way down like we said at the beginning of the video. Fernando, go ahead and play 1000 Hertz 0 dB. And let's turn the volume up. Now what we're gonna be checking for is the input clip on this, not the output clip. So there's little lights here at the top of the amplifier. They should light up red like it's doing right there. We got one on. Go ahead and turn it down one. Turn it up one. All right, so with it up one, we are getting a red light. As you can see, we have the red light. Go ahead and turn it down one. What volume number is that?
39.
So 39 it is. Now we're gonna play a 0 dB 40 hertz track and see where this goes. What this is testing is how far we can turn the volume of the radio up before the volume of the radio starts to die out. So 39 is pretty good because it only goes up to 40. Let me know when you're ready. So we're not getting the same clip on the sub output of the radio, but we're gonna set it to this one, which is 39. So go ahead and turn it back down to 39. And let's play 1000 hertz test tone, -5 dB. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna give us what's called gain overlap. Not all music is created equal. So basically what we're doing is we're just giving the customer a little bit of wiggle room, as it were. Depending on what you're listening to, you can turn it up or you can turn it down. There again, you always have to keep listening with your ears for a little bit of distortion. You can leave it at 0 dB. The only problem with doing that is that some music is just not gonna have any of that to it because it's recorded a lot lower than some other music. Is that 39?
That's a 39.
All right, now I'm gonna start turning it up. All right, right there we have a blue light on, so we're good. I'm gonna switch to the other side. Red light's bad, we'll kick it back until we see that blue light. So we know right there the rear speakers are going to perform good because the blue light is on. But the rear speakers sounded a lot louder than the fronts, and typically I like to run the rears down some. So I'm gonna go ahead and back it down about 1/4. Now I could do that from the head unit, but I prefer to do it at the amplifier. Now we're gonna go ahead and set the sub amplifier the same way. We're gonna use -5. And the reason why we're gonna use -5, in some cases we'd use -10, but we're gonna use -5 because we have the Epicenter, which is going to be delivering a lot of extra what it does to it. We don't want it to cause any unnatural problems. All right, so we have a blue light. We'll get that nice ugly red light that you can see there. We'll turn it back until it's blue. It's nice and blue. I'm gonna go on the, there, it's barely on. Now, because we are using the Epicenter, we wanna make sure we leave the punch EQ off. We don't wanna use that for anything because the Epicenter is gonna be doing all that fun and excitement. So we're done, that's it. That's all we have to do to set up the gain structure on the amplifiers. Now, for those of you guys that heard the term DD1 or whatnot, and you're like, hey, what's that? The DD1 is essentially an external device that does that same thing. A lot of amplifiers are starting to come with similar technologies built into it. Rockford is one of them. All right, so now that we have the gain set up, we're gonna go ahead and plug the subwoofers and all the speakers back in, making sure to turn the volume all the way down, and actually go ahead and just turn it off, Fernando. And then we're gonna put in our test microphone, which is this guy right here from Pioneer. They make this. You're gonna hit eject on the CD player. There is an aux jack behind it. We're gonna go ahead and put that in, and we'll set this thing up. As far as the crossovers go, the one nice thing about doing the auto EQ is it'll go ahead and set where it thinks those need to be. We have the amplifier set to 80, both high and low pass. We're gonna go back and adjust them once we get this done. Now, when setting up auto EQ, you want to have everything where it's going to be when the customer's in the car. So have the seat where the customer's going to put it, so you can put the microphone where his head's going to be. You want to make sure like the glove box closed. Everything is where it's supposed to be. That way it reads it properly. So now when you're at this point, we have everything put back together. It's ready to go. We're getting ready to start the test. Make sure you're in a quiet area. You don't want sirens and people talking and all that stuff. You gotta be quiet. So I'm gonna cut to the end because we really can't talk anymore. All right, the measurement is finished. We're all set and ready to go. So we'll go ahead and get the mic out of here. We still haven't put the dash on yet or the screws in. But now that we're at this point, I feel it's pretty safe that we can go ahead and get that part of the install done. And we'll finish our testing. The backup camera is still just loose, so we have to get that at the right angle. So we have an image. That's almost perfect. Actually, I'm gonna see if I can go down a little bit lower.
That's perfect.
Now, a couple helpful tips when installing a backup camera in a car. Two things. This is a GM, which means the engine has to be running in order for the reverse cameras to turn on, because the reverse lights only turn on when the engine is running. So don't freak out. Second thing, make sure that in the settings, it's turned on. Pioneer just started making that a feature to where they actually came on from the factory. They've always been off from the factory. Just like when we were testing, the subwoofer comes off from the factory. You actually have to go in and turn it on. Every manufacturer's got their little quirks a little bit different. We're gonna put the AC controls on, make sure they fit one last time, make sure the door opens and closes, and it's time to listen to it.
Yeah.
And I know what you're thinking. It's like, wow, all these steps, all these things, all this stuff you have to do. And it's like, yeah, one step leads to the next step, leads to the next step, leads to the next step. That's just how this goes. At the end, you don't want the mad dash to just get it out of the bay. You want to make sure you take your time and think everything through and make sure you haven't missed anything. That's key.
That's a key.
No, that's a microphone. All right, let's screw it in. We have it all back together. We got cool knobs and they're working. Now we're gonna switch sides. I'm gonna hop over on the driver's side and we'll take a look at how the auto EQ set this up. Now, one of the big misconceptions on the Pioneer Auto EQ is that it actually does something to the EQ. It doesn't do really anything for the physical EQ. It'll set up time correction and crossovers, but it's not touching the physical EQ. When you're done, it's still gonna be on powerful and it's still, you can play with it all you want. So the first thing we wanna look at is speaker level, and we can see here -2, -2, -7, -8. They have this set up to where they feel the rear is over loud and the front is just a little bit too loud as well. So what we can do is we can actually, if we want to set it back to 0, just subtract 2 from everything, and that will get us to where our gain stage that we decided we want will be set up. So we'll go ahead and we'll go 0, we'll go 0, 6, and 5. And of course the subwoofer is irrelevant. They always set that thing way too low. We'll go back here, we'll go to the crossover. They have the front set to 80, which is where we had it. They have the rear set to 125, which is odd because they're 6x9s. So we're just actually just gonna go in and turn those both off. Our amp set to 80, and then we'll leave the subwoofer on. Now you have to leave the subwoofer on. You can turn it up, which is what we're gonna do because we're gonna be using the Epicenter. We need to feed at least a 200 hertz and below frequency to that. But the reason why you have to leave it on is if you want time correction to work. Pioneer's logarithm is kind of strange, and if you turn off the subwoofer crossover in the past, it did weird things. So we'll just leave it on and turn it all the way up. So now that we have an idea of what they think it should sound like, we're gonna go ahead and listen to it. We still have the Epicenter disconnected because my music that I'm gonna listen to really isn't gonna need it, but I just want to test our music, and then we'll listen to some of his music, and then we'll bring back in the Epicenter. So first things first, let's listen to some Maroon 5. Now, when I'm without you. So it actually images pretty good, but I want to see what the EQ is doing, so we're gonna go ahead and for this all we need is an iTest mic. Alright, we got it where we want it. Everything's sounding good. There was a couple rises that we wanted to level out just a little bit on the EQ. So it was like there was a big hump in the mid-range that was kind of funky sounding. So we brought down that. Sounds much better now. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put back in the Epicenter, and I'm going to hop out of the seat because I need to have Fernando sit here because the type of music that they're listening to is more his speed than mine. I'm gonna have to go back there and adjust it and get it to where we want it. Alright, so as you can surmise, the music that this gentleman listens to is Latin music. Latin music typically doesn't have a strong bass note, and that was one of the concerns when we were building the system, was that we wanted to make sure there was tons of deep bass. Tons of deep bass. That's why we sold them the Epicenter, and Epicenter does this. So it's great for this type of music as well as 70s and 80s rock music that doesn't have it. So to give you guys an example, in case you didn't hear it, we're gonna play a song and we're gonna turn the volume up and down on it. Now, if you want to see how to set up an Epicenter, there's a whole video we filmed on just setting up an Epicenter. So go ahead, it's in the audio control playlist, check that out. We just want to hear it now, so press play. No sound. No Epicenter. So as you can see, adding the Epicenter will really just
boost it up.
I used to have an Aphex big bottom oral exciter. Same basic principle, but for your house. Used it for movies. Back when Dolby Digital or Dolby Pro Logic first came out, and you only had like the 0.1 subwoofer thing.
Wow. Oh yeah, I remember those. Yeah, I used to play with those.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, the logo was a butt.
No.
I think I still have it in the closet. Had to be real careful on the high side because it would just launch your speakers. The Morels were kind of scary when I kept that low, but man, I pounded the sub. The only thing we have left to do is cover the amplifiers back up in the back. Ooh, you know what we should do? You know what we haven't done?
Film the subwoofer.
Film the subwoofer. All right, we're gonna end the show with filming the subwoofer. Thank you so much for watching as always.
On to the next one, guys.
Definitely. All right, pop the trunk.